Welcome to episode 154 of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Breitman coming to you on Tuesday, August 29th, the first game week of the 2023 season for Rutgers football. Wanted to discuss the state of the team and Greg Schiano. Just had his first game week press conference of the season Tuesday afternoon. Wanted to discuss his tone, wanted to discuss some of the comments he made to Steve Politi in that article last week, talking about the rebuild of the program and just the overall kind of, tenor of things heading into a very, very important year for the program, for Schiano. And he's a very interesting coach, right? He has charisma. He has the it factor. I was there for the second introductory press conference, December 2019, his return, and he certainly has the ability to take over the room, and not just in his words, but he has a presence. And if you remember, he gave a very passionate speech in his return, and it was very good. And was talking about rallying the state and rallying everybody rallying everybody on board for Rutgers and everyone pulling towards the same goal, and that the program needed everyone's support in every possible way. And it was a very passionate speech, was very enthusiastic. Then he went to the RAC and he gave that passionate speech to the RAC crowd there as well. He really came in with a lot of bluster. He obviously had a lot of momentum in terms of the way the deal went down. I think, we're entering year 4, and it's been hard. I think that, he's obviously aged and he's not Greg Schiano the first tenure. Right? He's not in his late 30s, early 40s. And everybody kind of, when you age, your demeanor changes a little bit. I think his comments to Steve Politi's a very good columnist, very good journalist. I know that a lot of Rutgers fans have beef with him. I've never found him as one to, take cheap shots at Rutgers to take cheap shots. I think that Rutgers has given him a lot of material, and I don't think they're even cheap shots. Just gives them a lot of material to call out that are negative over the years. But I think that he was genuinely surprised by some of the things that Schiano said. I think that he obviously feels the pressure. I think he's very good at kind of tempering that down. I think he does not want to put pressure on this team. I think maybe I've been, to be honest, I've been a little disappointed in that. He's obviously very measured, but I just haven't felt like he's expressed a lot of excitement about this team and I guess made an effort to get the fans excited about this team. I understand not wanting to drive expectations so high that they're very hard to meet. At the same time, and this was mentioned in NewJersey.com. Brian Fonseca had an article today about ticket sales, and season tickets are down. But, if you look at the actual amount of tickets, it's less than 500. So it's still the second highest season ticket total in the last 5 years. So it's very close to what it was last year. And obviously COVID was a factor. But, the Ash days, they were down to 15, 16, 17,000 season tickets. Now it's still over 21,000. So I thought the article, is obviously very well written by Brian. I thought the overall message, to be honest, was a little bit of a reach in terms of saying that, a lot of fans are going to be disgruntled after this season and drop their season tickets. They obviously got some fans that were quoted saying that. But there was also a theme of, a lot of diehard fans. And I don't think, with everything that's happened in our lifetimes as Rutgers fans, whether you've been a Rutgers fan for 5 years or 50 years, if you're still a fan, I don't really know what could kill you off at this point. I get not wanting to spend money on season tickets. Life changes happen, of course. But is there going to be this mass exodus if Rutgers goes 3-9 or 4-8 this year? I don't think so. I could be wrong. Maybe a couple thousand. Obviously, that wouldn't be a positive. But there's a lot of pressure on this season. It's a pivotal season in his tenure. Him saying that, he's going to be the one to tell Rutgers when it's over, to Steve Politi, which is what Schiano essentially said. I think that it came across and is interpretable as, is that defensive? Is that defiance? Is that, him signaling control of the situation? Whatever it all is, I do think that it does show that there's real urgency there. And I think he feels it. And I think, he knows expectations are at a certain level. They're not the highest, right? No, I don't think anyone expects Rutgers to go 8-4 this year, or even 7-5. I mean, expecting them to go 6-6 and go to a bowl game, that's about as low of positive expectations as you can have. And I think year 4, it's fair to have those. He did discuss, he reminded everyone of the rebuild and how far away the program was when he took over, and that's true. I think that it's probably been more challenging than he could have envisioned because of NIL, because of COVID, and all the challenges that have come with both. The transfer portal is different, although Rutgers has fared pretty well in the Schiano era. I think he deserves credit for that. You have not seen a lot of key players, leave the program. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. I think that it speaks to the culture of the program and that it's strong, and that, the best players want to be at Rutgers. So, whatever NIL threats emerged in the offseason were taken care of. We know basketball talked a lot about that, about tampering with other schools. I'm sure it happened with certain players on the football team, but they all returned. Every key player that could have returned did. So that's credit to him. And I think that he's never been one to expound or give more than necessarily he thinks he has to in terms of his communication. One thing that I thought was interesting in the ticket article today by NJ.com, and Fonseca's article was talking about, fans wanting more access, being let in more, that it would drive interest. And I do agree with that. And obviously it's a challenge at times, right? To have something to write about, unless, you're like me, I have a fan site. I have more liberty than actual media, right? Because I bring a different perspective and context to my coverage. And I'm not saying that that's better. I'm just saying that, I can pull from past experiences as a fan and what I might think Rutgers, what that means to this current team. In terms of what Schiano gives and offers, it is limited. And obviously, I mean, every coach, wants to be limited, wants to protect as much as possible, because they're looking for every coaching advantage possible. It was, I thought it was a master class by Schiano in the press conference today. We're talking about the Big Ten rule. Now they don't release injuries until there's a standard set that they have to, release the injury report 2 hours before kickoff. And rather than, and maybe it'll change during the season when there are some obvious injuries, but, Schiano said basically they're going to stick to that in terms of Rutgers communicating to the beat reporters in the local media in terms of other injuries. So that's actually even less information than we got in the past. Again, like I said, we'll see. I'm sure typically long-term injuries, they do communicate pretty well. It's the guys on the fence they obviously don't want to give. But are we even going to get, on a Monday press conference, are we going to get the guys day-to-day or recovering, or is it just going to check the Saturday injury report? So I thought the way he handled that was actually very clever, and only helps him, right, in terms of protecting information. So my point is, I think that he's as competitive as any coach could be, right? He wants to win. He did comment to Politi about measuring results for how this season's judged, and he said obviously he hopes that they win, but did reference the rebuild and how far this program has come. And obviously with the Asher was a disaster. Rutgers was way behind when Schiano got here. I think if you look at it, if you isolate the season 1 was a success. They won 3 Big Ten games. It was COVID year. It was a weird year. They could have won more. Schiano did reference, they won some. He thought they won some big ones. They lost some he thought they could have won. That year, the Illinois and Michigan games stick out. I mean, they could have gone 5-4 that first season. Didn't work out that way. Also played Nebraska tough that last game when the team was pretty banged up. Then you have second year. I mean, they were 5-5 in mid-November that year. They obviously finished terribly in terms of those losses to Miami Maryland, and I believe it was Penn State. And then they lost the bowl game. They got in because of COVID. Texas A&M dropping out of the Gator Bowl. Did go to a bowl game, but they were 5-5 mid-November. So I think you can label year one and year two of Schiano 2.0 successful, right? It was a positive trajectory. Where it gets muddied now is year three. Last year, they went 4-8, and they were non-competitive the last 5-6 weeks. Schiano was pretty adamant last September that the team would be better in November, and they weren't. And I think that does also give you context in terms of why he's playing it very close to the vest right now. So I think all of that kind of needs to be processed or interpreted as fans, right? That I don't actually think he's being ornery or combative. I think that he's being protective. I think he's being protective of his team. And of course, listen, there's ego involved, and him saying, I'm going to be the one to say when this is over if I don't believe in it. Yeah, that's certainly an ego play, right? But at the same time, I do think that he's trying to keep pressure off this team. I think, listen, we all know there's a lot of questions with this team, right? The offensive line, which today, he said it was an improved product on the field, on the practice field. It's got to show in a game. I wrote this week, I have concerns about the offensive line. I think, the lack of reps as a starting five, and it's again no fault of the coaches for having to handle the hand that they're dealt, right? In terms of person, if you don't have five starters, clearly at some point you have to keep going, right, and try to make it work and see if someone emerges. But that's a concern, I think. And again, I think everyone's just assuming, and I like Holland Pierce and Curtis Dunlap, but everyone's just assuming it feels like that them moving to the left side, is a no-brainer in terms of moving from the right side. That's going to be an adjustment for them too. Probably less for Pierce as a tackle than Dunlap inside as a guard. But how is that going to go? Aside from who's going to take their place on the right side, you have Kamar, Missouri, and Tyler Needham at right tackle battling it out. And then you have Kobe Asamoah, I'm really high on long term, and then Mike Schiaffoni battling it out for right guard. How are they going to replace Holland, Pierce, and Dunlap? Obviously, a huge question mark. But I also think it's fair to wonder, how seamless of a transition will Dunlap and Pierce have on the left side? A lot of questions about the offensive line. Ireland Brown back at center. David Anderson and I went really in depth about the offensive line in our positional preview. You can check it on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts, of course, on the site as well. But then you have the wide receiver group, right? Is very unproven at this level. Obviously, Jaquay Jackson, Division II. You have Nassim Brantley, FCS, both all conference. Jackson was all American, Division II. But there's no guarantee that they're going to adjust well at this level. Can Chris Long step up and stay healthy and have a bigger role? Are new guys going to emerge? Is Dremel going to build off this spring momentum? Is Rashad Rochelle going to break through? Is Ian Strong really going to have a freshman breakout campaign like kind of the rumblings indicate it could be? We don't know. Tight end Sean Bowman, was an all-conference player, FCS level. How is he going to be a safety valve? Is he going to be a big play up the middle guy for Gavin Wimsatt? How is Gavin Wimsatt going to adapt? Is his accuracy going to be better? Is his mental mind, his mentality, his mindset, his processing of the defenses, of reading defenses, of play calling, of making adjustments, of reacting on the field? How is he going to do? How much is he going to run? There's so many questions about the offense. There's a ton of questions. Sam Brown, listen, I've gone on and on and on about how much I think he is a key to everything for this team. How healthy is he going into the season in terms of his recovery? He's obviously recovered from the injury, but how far along is he in his progression, in his, game readiness following the injury? The mental side, right? There's always mental hurdles after injuries. You just can't assume that he's going to be the same back whenever, however much he plays on Sunday and early on the season. And I've talked about this before. I mean, Rutgers has to hit the ground running in September. So I do think it's going to be that running back depth could be very, very. I think it's essential because I think Aaron Young and Kyle Monangai are going to have to produce early on with Sam Brown, because I think that, to expect Sam Brown to come in and do 25 carries week one, and, it's not realistic. And I honestly think that best case, if they can get production out of all three of those backs, it's going to make Rutgers harder to defend, harder to prepare for. It's going to make them a better offense. Ton of questions on the offense. Defense, obviously a lot of veterans back. But can they take the next step? Can the new guys that are there filling roles? I mean, Christian Izzy and Braswell, Avery Young, those are key losses. Can they have enough depth on the defensive line? There's just a lot of questions. Special teams, Adam Korsak's gone. How will Flint Appleby be? Will Jay Patel be ready as the place kicker? Coverage and return units, special teams. I mean, there are literally questions almost everywhere on this team, and Schiano knows that. So I think that his I think it's fair to say lack of enthusiasm in a way. I mean, he was very complimentary to the fans today. Obviously, he should have been. He was. I thought his tone on Tuesday's press conference was good. And I honestly think that I don't think they fully know what to expect from this team until they get a chance to go out there. I mean, Northwestern, he really talked up their defense, a lot of veteran guys there. Ben Bryant, does scare me. Northwestern hasn't named a starting quarterback, but he didn't go to Northwestern to sit on the bench. And, he's clearly the most accomplished quarterback that's going to be on the field on Sunday. So Rutgers is going to have to contain him. The defensive line really, the matchup that I see, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself with previews and everything, but the defensive line against the offensive line of Northwestern, that's really a huge matchup, I think, in this game. So entering year 4, Greg Schiano, 8-year contract, $4 million a year. He's now going to be the lowest paid Big Ten coach at the end of this year. And the question is going to be at the end of this year, is he going to get a contract extension? Because the typical unspoken rule, unofficial rule, is that once you get to, the life cycle of a recruit, if you're invested in the coach, you have to extend them, right? You have to prove in recruiting that coach is, the school's invested in him, the program's invested in him, he's going to be there a long time. This is a very compelling season, and not just because there's all this optimism, because there isn't. Right? I mean, like I said, expectations 6-6 bowl game. That is about as tame of optimistic view as there can be. And I think most fans would be thrilled at 6-6 in a bowl game. And I do think it's possible. A lot has to go right. A lot of those questions have to be answered correctly, not incorrectly. And it's going to be fascinating to watch. I think it's a very compelling season ahead. Greg Schiano's handling of everything, that's a big reason why I've said for a while now that the Northwestern game is a must win, because you lose that game to that program 1-11. The Full Red Network, which Scarlet Faithful is part of, we did a full college football preview last week. I actually formed a lot of the questions, and one question I asked, what's the worst Power 5 program right now? The majority of the answers was Northwestern. That's probably a pretty common answer around college football right now. You can't lose to Northwestern. You can't lose to Northwestern. The heat that would come on this team would be brutal. And for Schiano, year 4, again, I don't think he has to make a bowl game to justify things, but you have to show progress in some ways, right? Be more competitive against the Blue Bloods. Be more competitive against the top of the conference. And, I think ideally, winning the game against a team that they're not expected to would be huge. But you got to win the games that are matchup games, that are 50-50 games, that are games you're supposed to win. And Northwestern's a game on paper. I mean, they're favored by 6.5 points. It's a game they should win. They're at home. They're more stable. The culture's strong. Northwestern, listen, they have the us against world mentality. It's dangerous. They have a good quarterback. I don't think it's going to be, an easy game whatsoever. And that's why I don't care how much they win by. Just win by one. Um, but it's a very compelling season ahead. I think with the Athletic article and the dynamic, which was a terrible article, and that the narrative that Rutgers was the worst realignment move ever makes no sense because everyone in the Big Ten profited. Rutgers is, this is a long-term thing. 10 years from now, Rutgers is going to be in an even better spot. Joining the Big Ten, whatever conditions they had to, was a no-brainer. It benefited everyone in the Big Ten. It benefited Rutgers, and it's going to only benefit everybody in the long term as well. But you have that article out there. You now have this season ticket narrative out there. You have Schiano's comments last week that were interpreted as a little bit defiant, which they were. And you're going into a season with a ton of questions. So there's a lot of pressure out there. I think that the strain of training camp is now over. I think, Schiano even smiled a little bit. He said he was excited a few times. So I'm really hopeful. I'm hopeful that this team plays well on Sunday and they can build up some positive momentum. They have a chance. They have a chance to get some real momentum in this season and in this rebuild. And I'm fascinated to see if they can do it. And I'm fascinated to see how Schiano will react if they do it. If they're 4-1, going to Wisconsin, going into October, it could be a really fun season. If they lose to Northwestern, it's going to feel like a funeral. And it's going to be, I don't want to say that any one game is going to kill the season, kill the rebuild, but it's going to be a huge, huge obstacle if it happens. And, I don't think I'm unique in having that opinion. I think that's going to be pretty much across the board. And that's why this, I hate the narrative of the first game, overreactions to first games, but this one really is. It's truly a must win in week one. And I think, listen, I mean, Schiano's not dumb, right? He's a smart guy. He's gotten very far in his career. He knows it is. And I think that's, again, kind of maybe why he has been playing things close to the vest this whole training camp, this whole preseason, this whole offseason. Year 3 did not go the way he wanted, and they want to right the ship. So can they is the big question. Plenty of preview coverage. I know this was a bit of a full circle or a little bit of a ramble, but I just want to express some thoughts on how I think Schiano has been and then the pressure that's there. And, listen, I grew up, I was at Rutgers from 96 to 2000. Rutgers won 8 games in my 4 seasons there. So they beat Syracuse on a last-second field goal my senior year, 1999, dating myself. But so I obviously in my 20s, Schiano taking the program. I was at the Louisville game in 2006. I've had the utmost respect for what he did with Rutgers the first time. This is not an easy place to win. I have every hope that he will turn this tenure, this program around in his second tenure. But you have to look at it full perspective, full context. You have to look at everything out there. And, if it's a bad season, it's going to be really tough, I think, for 2.0 to end up successful. It doesn't mean this season will kill everything, but it's certainly going to make it harder. And I think that can speak to kind of the tone of things around Schiano right now. And I think that he's very happy that game week is here and the routine of that. And hopefully they can get the most out of this team on Sunday. Thanks for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful.